Alright, hi guys. Appreciate it's been a while. I've just not really had time to edit and record. But seen some comments asking about some basic blueprints and quick builds you can do. So figured I would show you a couple in this video. So, first thing we want to look at is this nice bit of breastwork. Now I already did a bit of digging because I started yapping and I realised I hadn't hit record in the video. But yeah, the idea of this is that it is a nice raised position where we can give our team some cover. They can get a good firing position but still duck down and be covered in movement. And obviously the first step is digging up the dirt to this breastwork position, but then ultimately we're going to add to that. Now, the other benefit we have of this is that we can make this multi-directional. So just to give you an idea of how the digging goes, you're going to dig up 3, 4, 5 times, whatever your server is max dig height, and then we want to dig out sideways. Reason I always recommend doing it this way is that you're going to spend less time stood on top of your earthworks being exposed. So everything that you dig out once you've got the height pretty much works at that height. Now you can then have a second engineer who goes on behind and does the more dangerous stand on top. But you will see in some of my gameplay videos that I'll often just do that myself, occasionally duck down and shoot back as needed. But what we've got here now is a nice covered position that we can start adding to. Now typically, first thing I will start to add to this is just trench reinforced walls. This is because if we just leave it as dirt, it's much easier for the enemy to break down. So if we reinforce this wall facing outwards, that makes it harder for them to remove the position and stops them as well from as easily climbing up. And now once we've got that set, we can start adding top cover. Now typically I'll use these concrete blocks because they don't snap to the terrain, they just stay level. In this case I'm going to add a corner MG nest looking out towards the A objective, just as an example of the types of things we can build on top of our breastwork. So now you can have an MG there, and out the side we start adding in these concrete walls, which, as I say, it doesn't matter how uneven your terrain is, that will always stay nice and level. It's also a sturdy bit of health bar on it, so we can start putting those in. Now, mistake I made, something I realised, is often when you build a reinforced trench wall, you'll hit the issue of you then struggle to build other things around it. So I tried twice here and I end up finding a jank angle where I can get the hit to build. But typically speaking, if you're going to be building stuff where you can, try to build the trench reinforcements last. But you can see the general idea now of we can have an MG set up there pointing towards A, rifleman on the side supporting, and it's a nice long position. Also then has the added benefit that if the enemy do destroy a bunch of it with artillery and such, we still have a covered position to fight from, and we can always look to repair that fighting position when the time and the enemy allows for it. So all I'm going to do now is quick time lapse where I'm just going to dig this round and make it into a full 360 degree position, and we'll talk a little bit about why we'd want to do that and the benefits of that in a bit. Now one thing you can see there was struggling a little bit to get that MG nest in place and level, so I just dug out the earthworks more to be able to get that more level. Because if you have your MG at or your sandbags at a weird angle, when the MG sets up in the window, their MG will be stuck at that weird angle. So you always want to make sure that you're building good for the MG angle. Now you'll see I'm adding in these nets at a slight sort of angle facing in. The main purpose for these in this type of spawn is, as I've mentioned in previous videos, these camo nets can help with stopping grenades being thrown. So they're acting kind of as catch nets for long distance grenades that people may want to try throwing. And by angling them back sort of towards the middle, then they're going to be less of an obstruction to guys heading up onto the sort of wall to want to fire over. You will see as I put some netting in front of the MG post that I am going up and sort of checking the lines of fire, and less lines of fire, more what is my viewpoint in first person. Do I personally think that I could shoot out of that? Sometimes you might want to avoid putting one right up against. As you can see there, half of it's a bit obscured. Once we've got this position, we can now put our spawn point down in the middle, put some ammo, put some health down, and this gives our team a pretty nice little spawn area. We can also then add in some binoculars or spotlights, searchlights if we're on a night map. That's going to give us the opportunity. I like to point them at objectives and we can kind of see the enemy in the objectives we want to hit. But yeah, this is our sort of turtle 360 defense point. We've got points where we can go up, we can shoot wherever we want, right? If the enemy took C, we can go up and provide fire onto C. If we want to support the push onto A, or hit the trench line over at the blimp, we can do all of that. So these are particularly good as these sort of isolated, more centrally positioned between objectives spawn points that you can build on a Conquest map. And yeah, you see here, this position sort of between A and B would be another sort of spot where I might put one of these, where I can support into A, I can support into B, and it gives us flexibility on where we want to go. The other key thing to consider though is that we want our team to be able to get out easily, right? So one thing that we can do to help support this is by providing firing steps or the sort of parapet trench wall in order to signify, hey, here's an easy way out, but it also helps just elevate people up and to a level where they can jump out easily. So you can put 2 or 3 of those around. Depending how big you've made it, you can line the whole edge, but generally speaking you want to try to keep it somewhat compact as a site so that a small number of people can easily shift to react to either side where they need to defend. One thing as well that you might be tempted to do with this is put some barbed wire down around, because the idea is obviously we want this to be, as you can see here, difficult for the enemy to approach and difficult for the enemy to get into. Now in this particular case I had this big patch up here where you could easily jump up, so I decided to put some barbed wire. I wanted to try put some low barbed wire because, as you can see, this larger piece would block the line of fire from the MG nest, but when I can't do that I will tend to opt for the small larger barbed wire piece, so I can sort of block off these ways without being too obstructive to the view of the machine gun nest. But yeah, we want to avoid placing barbed wire around here because this is going to obstruct our team's ability to leave in any direction that we want to assault any objective we want. Especially on Conquest maps like this, where one moment we could be defending C, the next moment we need to be assaulting C. So the other thing as well is, on a similar vein, this works best when it's isolated, so we don't want to be digging trench lines to and from this position. This very much wants to sit on its own, not really part of any trench network. Reason is, we might think, hey, we've got C, let's dig a nice comms trench down from C so we can easily access our spawn. The problem then becomes the other team captures C, now they've got that easy access to the spawn location. So whilst, yeah, it might make our retake a bit easier, you generally want to have a trench networks adjacent to this, but not connected, because that's really then going to make things easier for them. Now next, just as a couple quick blueprints, obviously stuff you've seen before, but we've got the raised MG position. This is something you would have seen me use in my reserve line or my support line trenches, which is just nice and simple, a raised bit of earthworks, again getting the height on the earthwork first, then digging the length, trying to get this nice and flat so that we can then put our machine gun window or machine gun nest on the top. You can see in a minute, yeah, I'm just spending extra time trying to get this somewhat flat. You can see I'll demonstrate a bit here that this is the kind of angle we want. If I place this a bit too far back and we get that upwards angle, that's then going to be the machine gun nest stuck angle. If I build one like this, obviously not going to be useful at all. So often you'll find this subtle little flick back and forth, and you want to try and just get it as level as you possibly can. Even in this case, you can see that it's slightly angled up, so the machine gun, when it places, will be slightly angled up, but he will then be able to still traverse that gun down and have the depression on the gun to use it. Then typically with these raised positions, I'll add top and side cover. So the top cover does snap to the dirt, so I will place it to the side. I will line it up so that the peak of the top cover's arch is lined up with the top of the actual firing hole, and we can get that placed and built, and that's just going to provide a bit of shelter from artillery as well as a bit of cover from the side. And then again, as you would have seen me build when I do these in my other videos, I'll always put in more side cover, so this is very much a sort of bunker nest, and I'm not fully building, I'm just illustrating the point, but somebody would be in here and be covered. Same principle can then be applied at multiple layers. So we have a raised machine gun nest, we can just build one of these at the ground level, putting down the sandbags, and then again just whacking our top cover on top of it, and then we can turn that into a dug-in position by just digging the dirt down. Or if we were building a trench, again, things you've seen me do in my other videos, you dig out a spur, put the sandbag down at the end of the spur. We just need to be mindful that we give enough ramp on the earth that our team can still run up. So you don't want to be putting, for example, these reinforced walls in front of the sandbags. If I'm going to put anything, it will be a parapet like so. So yeah, that's just a quick MG nest. Nice little update just there in recently is now you don't have to worry about floating sandbags. So aesthetically speaking, things are a bit easier to make now as well. Finally, spawn points. A very quick spawn point template. So we're back here in one of the trenches from my other video on basic trench designs. You can see there an example of the raised machine gun nest. But let's say I wanted to add a trench to this, or a spawn point to this, sorry. I'm just going to come out to an end. I might dig a little spar back. But again, we'll put our top cover in. In trenches, I always try to do top cover first, because that's the most awkward thing to place, especially when there's reinforced trench walls, because of the fact that its elevation and its position goes off the side. I'll then dig it out a little bit. Again, this is depending how much of a rush I'm in to put in the spawn, but I'll add to the sides there. You'll see I don't immediately put on the back. I'm going to put some concrete barriers down first. This is because we want to block off the back, stop people from shooting or throwing grenades in, and it's easier to place these before I've put that reinforced wall in. And then, as you would have seen me do with the previous wall, because I want to give myself space and I don't want to lose loads of space to this placement, Where I can, I will run up and behind and place it further back by placing it on the floor essentially. Then you can place your spawn. If you happen to have a shovel, not a pickaxe, won't work with a pickaxe with the hit areas, you can flatten this down, give yourself a bit more room for maneuver. But again, depending on how much time you've got, we can then place our spawn point down, remembering we're not placing it this way, although that's intuitive. We want to place with the hatch facing us. And there we are, that's our little spawn point. I then decide, because I can, just to touch up the trench a little bit, make it look a little bit nicer, and dig it out. These are all things I just end up doing as an engineer whenever I see in my mind an incomplete trench. And then the final thing that we can add, or the final thing to be aware of, is this idea that everything that gets built can be seen on the map. So when you're building these spawn points with top covers, bear in mind that when the enemy are looking for a spawn, they're going to be looking at these trenches thinking, hey, that circle but looks like it could be where they're coming from. Hey, that bit of top cover is likely got a spawn underneath it. So less important when you're building in a trench, because there's going to be a lot of top cover in the trench for them to think of, right? So you can see, sorry, just with my mouse I'm illustrating, hey, if they're coming from this way, they're probably spawning from there. If they're in this trench, it's going to be one of these top cover pieces. So yeah, less important when you're building in a trench, because there's lots of top cover in a trench, but something to bear in mind if I'm building something out on a flank and isolated, right, is it's going to be the more like a spawn point I make it look, the easier it's going to be. So if I build something out by those trees, and there's just one little bit of top cover in a field, and then enemies coming from there, that's probably a spawn point. So last thing I'll add is obviously my netting. I always add these in front. Helps hide visibly, and again stops grenades and such from going in. But yeah, that was just a quick one on a spawn, sort of the spawn turtle you could call it, build. Nice 361. It's good for using Conquest matches. I know a lot of the stuff I've talked about is more applicable to front lines, as I call it, but this is a spawn that you can apply to your Conquest matches and put in fun places. And likewise, this sort of breastwork that I'm just building another example of here is a good way that you can almost do pop-up fire positions that don't require a full trench network behind them. They're fairly quick to build, very useful, can support multiple shooters, and has the added benefit, one of the big drawbacks I've not really talked about with the MG nest, is when I'm scanning a trench line, first thing I'm looking at is the windows of sandbag walls for MG nests for snipers in those positions. The upside of having a nice long breastwork position with the walls like this is that a shooter can come up, shoot, pop back down, maybe have ammo and health behind him, pop up, shoot again, come back down, and be in a different spot every time. So it's a bit harder to predict where you're going to be shot from with these positions. So yeah, hopefully you guys have found this a bit useful. I do have more gameplay. I've just finished editing the footage of, as I say, an attack on Fort Saint Amand, but I just need to do voiceover and stuff. My throat, as you can probably tell getting to the end of this, is a little knackered at the moment, so I'll try and get that voiceover done this week and have it out for this weekend. But other than that, let me know what you guys want to see, what gameplay you want to see, and yeah, any questions, throw them in the comments. But thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll see you sooner than it's been for this break. Peace.